Right, should be good. All right, so hello everyone. My name is Sarah Kennedy. Thank you all for joining this Capstone Project Dissemination presentation for enhancing accessibility and usability in Rocky Mountain National Park. For those who are joining live, I just wanted to let you know that I have emailed the slide deck and attached the link for my website, which I will reference a little bit, but I also will show the link at the end of this presentation as well. And then for anyone watching later, I will attach the link to the website below too. So as an overview, the purpose of this capstone project is to increase the usability and inclusivity at Rocky Mountain National Park. My goal is to ensure that the park can meet the diverse needs of all visitors, fostering opportunities for people of all abilities to engage in the beautiful outdoor spaces for both leisure and health purposes. From a career perspective, this capstone will help me develop essential skills in program development, education, and advocacy, as well as gain experience and expand current knowledge of accessibility and universal design in emerging practice areas of occupational therapy. These are all critical competencies for my future role as an occupational therapist, with my personal goals of creating inclusive environments that support health, wellness, and social participation for all individuals. So, why accessibility in nature? For one thing, nature has been a huge part of my personal life for as long as I can remember. If you see the slide here, there's a photo of my family when I was pretty young at Smoky Mountain National Park. Um, but kind of beyond that, throughout occupational therapy school and my clinical rotations, as well as when I worked in home health, I have met so many amazing individuals with a variety of disabilities, injuries, and conditions. And I kept meeting individuals that had expressed a huge desire to get back into nature. And like me, they had such a big passion for it, but they constantly faced barriers that made it either extra difficult or even impossible to do that. The CDC reports that 1 in 4 adults in the US live with some form of disability. So this is not a small or niche issue. It's widespread inequity and it deserves attention. As a future occupational therapist, I believe that everyone should have the opportunity to engage in the occupations that bring them joy and meaning, and this includes in getting involved in nature. So connecting with Rocky, Rocky Mountain National Park, in collaboration with its education and philanthropic partner, the Rocky Mountain Conservancy, have had long-standing have long recognized the importance of improving accessibility. Over the years, they've had many different efforts to enhance accessibility. Some of these past efforts include creating accessible trails, um, incorporating new accessibility standards into ongoing changes and projects, working to create an accessibility guide. However, due to limited time, staffing, resources, and many other things, especially these days, accessibility initiatives have not always been able to take priority. So when I reached out to the park, our goals aligned really closely, and my role allowed me to be that person to dedicate my full time and attention to advancing these efforts, while I also, of course, collaborated with the park staff and got to use their knowledge and skills that already exist. So this partnership really created an ideal opportunity to make meaningful progress on those longstanding goals. So, what is the role of occupational therapy in this emerging practice area, in this space where OT isn't very common? So, as an occupational therapy student, I came in with the knowledge and training to assess potential barriers that might impact park users in settings and situations such as the built environment, which includes buildings and man-made spaces, as well as through adaptive technology. Additionally, the natural environment, so the nature all around the park, through social interactions and supports, as well as within culture and existing values. So, based on any existing barriers, I also have the skills to provide recommendations and insights into ways to increase participation for those park users and to create supports that benefit all visitors. So, my learning objectives while I completed my capstone were to gain a deeper understanding of current Rocky Mountain National Park accessibility content, programs, and staff knowledge so that I could better understand the general park layout, the staff roles involved, as well as the OT application in the setting. Um, Secondly, my goal would be to, our objective would be to educate Rocky Mountain staff on accessibility, however that might look based on the needs of the park and the staff. And then finally, to increase public access to accessibility content within the park. So, I created a needs assessment, and this was kind of partially created before I started my capstone, and then kind of completed for the first few weeks while I was at the park. So this needs assessment included a review of Rocky's resources and trainings. So this included both general as well as accessibility focused. And within this, I learned staff roles and how everything kind of worked together in order to better understand kind of the baseline and the context of the space I was entering. Next, I performed a broader literature review outside of just Rocky on accessibility strategies, national guidelines, best practices, and standards. So this also included me looking into other parks and accessibility efforts within recreation areas, public spaces such as museums and zoos to kind of see what other spaces are doing, what's working well, what maybe isn't so great, just to get an idea on how those ideas may fit into Rocky's situation. Next, I conducted site visits in order to kind of assess on the ground accessibility through evaluations and just observation of physical spaces and kind of just checking out what the available resources are in place throughout the park. Additionally, I engaged in conversations with park staff and park users in order to identify accessibility gaps, knowledge gaps, and just gather improvement ideas. And then finally, I identified staff training needs through a review of current staff education content, as well as through those conversations with staff, where I discussed kind of their preferences on topics that would be beneficial, priority areas, as well as what would be the most helpful setting for that education, based on like their job, being able to take time, things like that. And so once all that was done, I kind of compiled and synthesized my findings so that I can kind of create final recommendations and figure out a project direction that makes the most sense. So projects and deliverables. I kind of had three main project goals while at the park based on the needs assessment as well as my objectives. So the first was to expand and finalize the access guide content. The goal of this guide is essentially to provide a resource where people can view the accessibility supports and features within the park, and then plan accordingly based on their needs. So just kind of give them all the information available, and then they can make their own choices after that. Next is to develop and present staff training for how and when to utilize the assistive listening devices at Rocky. And this was based largely on staff requests and people bringing up that this was something that would be beneficial. And then finally, to provide a list of recommendations and tips for sustainability of the access guide and future park accessibility related improvements. So kind of diving into those three project deliverables. So this is just a little outline of the access guide, a few images. One is just the front page, one is just a picture of kind of the table of contents, and then one is a sample of one of the trails. If you'd like to look more into the draft of the access guide that I made, that is available on my website, so feel free to look at that. Um, but I do just want to preface that Rocky had done a lot of preliminary work to start this access guide, such as creating site descriptions, creating just a general list of sites that definitely should be included or some potential options, as well as a large portion of the recording of trail data. So my job was kind of to add in any more content that I like, any additional sites that I could find, as well as any like kind of finalizing those sites, getting all the last details, and then additionally kind of expanding the background information that we were including. So kind of the general accessibility content, such as the information on adaptive equipment available at the park, things like that. And then also something very important that I was doing was kind of ensuring that everything we mentioned in the guide actually is in place and staff is knowledgeable to utilize that. So if someone comes in looking for that support, it is fully functioning and they can utilize it. So I finalized this draft and the end result included 20 site descriptions, which included trails, pull-offs, picnic table or picnic areas, and then a lot of details on those areas, such as the one shown on the slide, and then that background general accessibility content that I mentioned. With this, I also was able to connect with the Washington Support Office and the accessibility experts there, and they actually agreed to kind of take over the formatting of the guide because I uploaded all the general content and uploaded a great deal of images that highlight the areas that might be obstacles, as well as general images to get the idea of what the area looks like. But they agreed to format it, which worked perfectly because my graphic design is a little beyond my skills and scope of practice. So that collaboration really worked great, and hopefully that should be done here shortly. So the next project was the assistive listening device education. So this included a user guide that I created on how to set up and use the specific assistive listening devices that Rocky Mountain has access to, as these were currently not being utilized. And then I also created a form to go with that kind of provided some Rocky Mountain specific suggestions of when it might be helpful to utilize these and like what situations these would be beneficial or what situations maybe a different form of support that Rocky has would be better. So I was actually able to do 2 brief staff trainings using these forms, and they were very successful. Everyone said it made a lot of sense. I was able to kind of do a teach back, and they were using the form, able to set them up on their own. So that's great because I want to make sure that the education content I'm creating doesn't rely on me being here as I'm almost done. And then finally, to kind of go with these forms, I also created an overview of the Rocky Mountains National Park's Beaver Meadows Visitor Center's listening system. So kind of just an overview of the technology they have available so that the staff can reference it and they can also determine the capacity of support that they can offer moving forward because they were utilizing a lot of the supports that they're able to use, but there's some opportunity for even more. So I kind of just highlighted those areas for future work. And then finally, I created a long document with formal recommendations to improve accessibility within the park. Some of these include small, easier fixes such as adding in an accessible parking sign, trimming branches on trails, or leveling out surfaces. And then some also were much larger construction alterations, systematic changes, and then investments in new equipment or technology. My hope is that this list can be used as a reference for any larger park projects that are taking place so that these aspects maybe could be integrated into a larger change or a larger funding project that's occurring. So kind of thinking about the overall impact that I had during this 14-week capstone. As I was kind of coming the last few weeks coming to an end, I realized I was kind of addressing accessibility almost in a trifecta. So I was addressing the accessible environments and adaptive equipment, so kind of like the physical spaces through my recommendations in the hopes that those will occur in the future. And then I help to create a more informed staff, hopefully better set to support any park visitors by creating the assistive listening device training, as well as um, creating the accessibility guide and giving them kind of a reference to look at all of the accessibility content. So hopefully they're feeling more confident and set up for success if a park user asks them a question. And then finally, I help to create a clear and current visitor information through the development of the access guide, in the hopes that now, or once it's finalized and published, visitors can plan ahead and then make informed choices based on their situation. And kind of through this project, I realized that you really need all three aspects to have the most impact. If you have just the accessible environment and then the supportive staff in place, but no way of kind of getting that information out there to the public, it's not going to be quite as helpful and people aren't going to feel as confident coming there without being able to plan accordingly. So a hope of mine is that maybe other parks can reference my project or even specifically just the guide and then use it almost as a blueprint to create their own version based on their park needs. Additionally, kind of with all of these aspects, I have been and I this final week will continue to intentionally ensure that I'm connecting all of these resources with kind of a point person at Rocky so that none of this information is lost as I leave. Because I think a lot of what I've done is just the beginning of a longer path. And so hopefully I'm setting up for future success as well. And then, kind of along that line, thinking about future sustainability, I do have some recommendations both for the park as well as for any future students interested in doing this similar work. So, within Rocky, some recommendations include incorporating assistive listening devices and access guide training into staff and volunteer orientation, to continue the IDT accessibility staff group to finalize the guide and revise based on community feedback as you just finish these final steps. To perform routine review of the accessible facilities within the park, and you could even assign that to individual people every few months. And then to use the recommendations that I've created as well as the current park project list as a roadmap for future funding projects, kind of like I've previously mentioned. And then finally, annual or biannual updates of the guide. I think especially at the beginning when you're probably getting a lot of information on things that might have been missed, just keeping that updated. And then future WashU or other student project ideas, to collect and integrate feedback for the access guide from content experts, staff, and then those within the disability community to make sure everything is looking good and that nothing is missing. And I've actually created a list of contacts within the community and individuals to reach out to that are willing to review any information. To develop staff training for how best to support park visitors who are neurodivergent or have intellectual or developmental disabilities, as I noticed that there was a gap currently in staff training on that topic. To develop and integrate staff and volunteer onboarding training on the access guide, as I've mentioned. to create junior ranger program enhancements to increase resources for children who may benefit from extra assistance. And then finally, to develop a plan to update visitor centers' accessibility features by having them be more inclusive, such as through audio description of images, captioning for written words, and adding additional tactile elements, as some of these visitor centers are several decades old. And then just a few quick proposed traits for future students. I think any future student interested in something like this definitely should enjoy the outdoors. Certainly should be flexible, both with their schedule and with their creativity for how to bring OT into a new setting. Have a collaborative mindset to work with many different people, including park staff, rangers, park users, content experts, and more. And then finally, a passion for accessibility. So I just wanted to say thank you all for listening. You can reach me, feel free to reach out to me with the contact information shown on the slides. And then I also just wanted to say that could not have done this capstone without the help of my capstone site mentor, landscape architect Rose Lang, or my WashU mentor, Dr. Carla Walker. So a big thank you to them. Because of this experience, I've learned so much about accessibility, collaboration, and just how OT can fit into unexpected settings. And I will be a better occupational therapist because of it. So thank you. And my website link is also shown on this slide.